The envelope arrived on a Thursday morning, tucked neatly between a stack of bills and a local grocery flyer, cream-colored, thick paper. My full name, written in that elegant cursive my mother saved for Christmas cards and passive-aggressive thank you notes. I ran my fingers along the raised lettering like it might disappear, like it wasn't real. Seraphine, you've always been the heart of our family. We want you there to celebrate our 35th anniversary. A seat has been saved just for you. That line. A seat has been saved just for you. I stared at it for a long time. Maybe too long. I stood by the kitchen window, coffee going cold in my hand, and for a second, I believed it. I let myself imagine walking into a room filled with warmth, the kind of forgiveness that doesn't need words. Maybe this was the moment, where they saw me not as the reliable one, not as the one who pays and stays quiet, but as someone they missed, someone they wanted back. The villa was in San Antonio. An expensive, Spanish-tiled roof, string lights crisscrossing the courtyard. People in floral dresses and pressed slacks wandered with wine glasses, laughing like this wasn't the same family that hadn't returned my last 3 calls. A young man in black slacks and a tight vest greeted me with a clipboard and polite smile. Name? Seraphine Thorne. He scanned, nodded, and gestured toward the backyard. Right this way. I followed him through the double doors, expecting to be led inside, to the head table, maybe near the cake, or at least within earshot of the music, but we walked past all of that. Through the patio, down a gravel path, toward the back corner where the lawn met the chain-link fence. Your seat is just over here, he said, pulling out a lone folding chair at a round table. I blinked. The table was small, 3 seats, no linens, no place settings, just a name card with Seraphine on it, fluttering slightly in the breeze. And to the right of the chair, a large, well-used dog kennel. Inside, a golden retriever lay curled, panting lightly. I looked at the staff member. Is this a guest table? He hesitated. It's where you were assigned, ma'am. I smiled tightly. Right. Inside, laughter spilled through the open doors. The scent of warm focaccia and grilled steak floated on the breeze, tempting but distant. I adjusted my dress, sat slowly, and tried to shake off the chill in my spine. Maybe it was a space issue. Maybe they'd overbooked the guest list, and this was just temporary. Maybe I was overreacting. But the dog whined and rested his head on the wire gate, eyes meeting mine with the kind of empathy that made my chest ache. I reached down, ran my fingers over the soft fur between the bars. At least you remember me, I whispered. The champagne flutes clinked in the distance, followed by the unmistakable timbre of my mother's voice projecting into a microphone. We are so proud of our family. Every single one of you makes this day unforgettable. I didn't hear my name. Maybe I missed it. Maybe she hadn't gotten to that part yet. Maybe she never would. The dog let out a quiet huff, like he knew better. I scanned the patio. My sister Isolde waved her glass toward someone in the crowd, her laugh sharp and rehearsed. My brother leaned in close to a woman I didn't recognize. No one looked this way. No one waved. I thought about the holidays I'd covered, flights, gifts, hotels, the college textbooks I'd paid for, the time my mother called at 2 a.m. because the heater had gone out and she didn't want to bother the others. I thought about how no one asked how I was doing after I lost my job last year, how I'd shown up anyway, always. Now I was sitting beside a dog, separated by a lawn and a lie from the people I once called home. The dog stood, stretched, and plopped down beside my feet, his nose brushing my calf like he was claiming me. I smiled, for real this time. Small, but real. The sun dipped lower. Lights twinkled. Applause rang out inside. But when the server brought out the name cards for dinner, that's when I realized this wasn't a mistake. It was a message. After what felt like hours sitting next to that kennel, pretending not to notice the glances, or the lack of them, I finally stood up. My legs were stiff, but not from sitting. It was the way the air hung around me, like I was a guest at a party I never RSVP'd to, even though I'd been invited. Inside, the dinner seating had begun. Staff moved swiftly between tables, carrying place cards with delicate calligraphy, placing them in front of guests who greeted them with easy smiles and nods. One of the servers, a young woman with a practiced smile and nervous energy, approached me cautiously. "Ms. Thorne?" she said, holding a card. I just wanted to let you know something." I raised an eyebrow. "Your name wasn't originally on the list," she whispered, glancing over her shoulder. "I think someone added it last minute, handwritten. We're not supposed to say anything, but I thought you should know." She handed me my place card. I looked at it. Seraphine, scribbled in black ink over what looked like a faded name, perhaps Sabrina or Sandra. It had clearly been erased, overwritten, rushed, like I was an afterthought, like I'd only been penciled in once they were sure I was showing up. I said nothing, just gave a small nod, turned back to my table, and sat. At that point, I pulled out the original invitation card from my purse. I needed something to ground me, to remind myself this wasn't all in my head, and there it was, something I hadn't noticed before. At the bottom, just below the RSVP line, in smaller, almost hidden font. "You may bring a guest, or your dog." My dog. Who writes that in a formal family invitation? I glanced over at the pristine, custom-embossed card on Isolde's table. Gold foil, thick paper, zero casualness. I had the off-brand version. "You came alone?" a voice asked, drawing my attention. I turned. One of my cousins, David, I think, smiled at me with his usual smugness. "Thought you'd bring your Labrador. Isn't she your +1 these days?" I forced a laugh, tight and brittle. "She has better taste in events." He chuckled like he hadn't just said something deeply insulting. "Always the funny one, huh?" As he walked away, I noticed others looking at me, then looking away. Conversations paused when I got close. Eye contact was brief, polite, and disengaged, like they were all performing a play, and I'd walked on stage without a script. Champagne flowed freely, except to my glass. Mine had sparkling water. No one asked if I wanted wine, and when the photographer passed by, his camera panned right past me as if I were part of the scenery. I felt like static in a room tuned to a different frequency. One of the younger cousins, barely out of high school, sat down beside me. She leaned in, her voice low. "They told us you might not come, said you were always so busy with work or distant." I smiled politely. I guess I surprised them. She looked like she wanted to say more but thought better of it. I folded my napkin neatly in my lap and watched the evening unfold. Toasts, laughter, speeches. But never once did someone turn toward my table, my corner by the fence, and acknowledge me. Not even the dog barked. The photographer clicked a dozen shots of the head table, the cake cutting, the big group laughs. But never once did he lift the lens in my direction. I sat through it all, my hands steady on the linen, my expression calm. But inside, the math was changing. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't oversight. It was choreography. When people minimize you long enough, you start to minimize yourself. You begin to justify the silence. To tell yourself they're just busy, just distracted, that it's your fault for drifting. Not anymore. So I didn't speak up. I didn't storm out. I just watched, memorized faces, noted patterns, documented it all in my head. I stopped trying to be seen and started seeing them for who they were. Toward the end of dinner, my mother stood up again, wineglass in hand. Her smile was fixed, her voice full of warmth and performative nostalgia. "I want to thank our incredible family tonight," she said, eyes sweeping the room. "Isolde, for helping with the guest list. August, for coordinating with the venue. Everyone who made tonight perfect. We are so blessed." She didn't say my name, not once. I raised my glass, still full of sparkling water, and toasted myself. And then came the slideshow. That's when it hit me. This wasn't about forgetting. This was about erasing. The lights dimmed just as I brought the glass of sparkling water to my lips. A hush fell over the room, broken only by the clinking of glasses and a few late shuffles of guests settling back into their seats. I knew what was coming. The slideshow. The one my mother had previewed in the invitation as a walk down memory lane. I braced myself with a hopeful breath. On the screen appeared bold letters. 35 years of family, 3 generations of love. A soft piano track played. The first photos were black and white. My parents in their 20s, newly married, smiling on the front steps of their first home. Then came the babies. Isolde wrapped in a hospital blanket, my brother August holding a rubber duck. I expected the rhythm. Each child growing up, birthdays, first bikes, dance recitals, school awards, and then came the abrupt jump. One moment, it was Isolde at prom with her date in that ridiculous teal tuxedo. The next, it was August graduating college, my parents' arms slung around him in caps and gowns. Something was missing. I leaned forward slightly. I knew what should have been there. I had seen those photos with my own eyes. Hell, I organized them into digital folders years ago. My middle school talent show, my high school graduation, my first car. Where were they? The timeline had skipped from their moments to their next moments. I'd vanished in the transition. Behind me, someone chuckled at a shot of Isolde holding her baby, smeared in birthday cake. Laughter erupted at another slide of my dad's hair in the 90s. I sat still, not blinking. "You okay?" a voice whispered. I turned. It was my cousin Eli, younger by a decade, awkwardly clutching a dessert fork like it might save him. "I think I blinked and missed your part," he added, half joking. "Yeah," I said, my voice dry. "I must have been on vacation during my own life." He offered a weak laugh and quickly turned back to his plate. I looked toward the front of the room. Isolde stood near the laptop, clicking through the presentation. Her smile was tight, performative. She glanced toward our parents, then nodded as if waiting for approval. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't a mistake. I didn't say anything, didn't storm up there and demand to know why I'd been edited out like a deleted scene. No drama, just stillness. Instead, I walked back to my table and sat quietly. I watched the dog beside the kennel shift its weight and sigh, as if it too had grown tired of the show. They didn't forget me, I thought. They chose not to remember me. It was different than being overlooked. Overlooked is accidental. This was deliberate, strategic. My mother always said Isolde had a gift for detail. Clearly, it extended to deletions too. I made a mental note to ask about the slideshow later, fully aware of the excuses I'd hear. "Oh, the file got corrupted. You weren't in as many photos. We couldn't find the right clips." All polished lies wrapped in hallmark politeness. I reminded myself of a line from Maya Angelou. "When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time." I hadn't believed it the first time, or the second. But now it was getting harder to deny. Just then, my father stood up, wine glass in hand, his tie slightly loosened, eyes glassy with emotion, or maybe the wine. "I want to raise a toast," he said, "to the children who've made our lives full." He turned toward August. "To your loyalty. To Isolde. To your grace and dedication." He paused. My name did not follow. "To the future of this family," he continued, "and to the roots that made us strong." Applause filled the room. My wine glass was still untouched. I didn't raise it. No one reached to clink it. So I lifted it slowly, gently, and whispered to no one but myself, to invisible daughters and the silence we turn into strength. The slideshow might have skipped me, but I'd already started writing the version they couldn't delete. But the next blow didn't come from the past. It came wrapped in a folded piece of paper slid across the table. The last of the slideshow flickered out. Some people clapped. Others dabbed their eyes, mostly out of nostalgia, I guessed. I sat in silence, my wine glass still full, untouched, glistening under the dimmed chandeliers. I heard my father lean into the microphone again. "I'd like to make another toast," he said warmly, "to the children who've shaped our lives, to Isolde for her endless grace, to August for always being the rock we could lean on." The words fell like bricks on my chest. No pause, no mention of me. Someone at the next table turned toward me, a woman I vaguely remembered from childhood birthdays. She squinted, then whispered, "Are you a friend of the family, or?" I smiled, tight and short. I used to be one of them, until I wasn't. She offered a polite chuckle before shifting back to her conversation, clearly uninterested in whatever awkwardness lingered. My jaw clenched. I steadied my breathing. My mother stood again moments later, clinking her glass with a perfectly manicured fingernail. I just want to thank each of our wonderful children, she beamed. Isolde, who helped plan every detail of this night. August, who coordinated with the vendors, even flew in our favorite champagne. More claps. And of course, she glanced vaguely in my direction. Seraphine, who's always been so quiet. A few chuckles fluttered through the air, unsure whether it was meant as a joke. My chest tightened. Isolde leaned over to her husband and said, just loud enough, "Classic Mom, couldn't even pretend this year." My hand tightened around the stem of the glass. I raised it slowly again, like I had before, but this time not in toast, just in habit. No one clinked back. I needed air. I excused myself and made my way through the patio doors, walking past the fountain and toward the back hall that led to the restroom. The hallway smelled like lemon floor polish and faded lilac air freshener. As I rounded the corner, I nearly ran into someone, Lindsay Carver, a family friend I hadn't seen in years. Her hair was shorter now, cut close to her chin, and her eyes lit up in recognition. "Seraphine," she smiled, then lowered her voice. "Wow, I wasn't sure you'd actually be here." I tilted my head, curious. "Why wouldn't I be?" She hesitated. "Well, your mom mentioned you were distant lately. Said you don't do family much anymore." I blinked once. Maybe I don't do performances. Lindsay gave an awkward laugh, unsure if I was joking. I excused myself again and stepped into the restroom. Cool tiles. Soft lighting. I stood in front of the mirror and stared at my own reflection, shoulders squared, lipstick still intact. I whispered the words I had rehearsed so many times. "This isn't okay. You don't get to write me out." And yet, I swallowed the words back down. I splashed water on my hands. Dried them slowly. Thought about leaving. Instead, I walked back into the event. I didn't sit. I stood in the far corner of the room, just beyond the fairy lights strung across the ceiling. I watched them, my family, laughing, toasting, performing. They want me present, I thought, but not seen, quiet, but dependable. They want my money, not my memories. I scanned the room, noted who glanced at me and looked away, who laughed at the wrong moments, who repeated the lines like a script they'd practiced. And I watched my mother's face, the one that could flash from warmth to ice in a breath. That night, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't call them out. I simply stood still and made a decision. Not this time. So when the envelope slid across my plate, I wasn't surprised. I just wondered how high the price would be this year. I returned to the table in silence, weaving past waiters and relatives who barely noticed I'd left. The laughter hadn't died down. The room pulsed with it, too loud, too rehearsed. I lowered myself into the chair with mechanical precision, like a woman sitting down for her sentencing. And that's when I saw it. A new name card had been placed in front of my seat. The cardstock was the same as the others, but the handwriting was different. Thicker, uneven. It read Sabrina. Sabrina, the name of our childhood golden retriever. For a moment, I didn't move. I stared at the card like it might change under my gaze. Maybe I'd misread it. Maybe it said Seraphine, and I just wasn't seeing clearly. Then I heard the laughter, from across the table. Isolde, of course. "Oh, come on," she said through a giggle, nudging her wine glass. "It's just filler. We didn't think you'd actually show. That was just a placeholder." The others chuckled. One of my cousins added, "We almost wrote princess instead." No one apologized. No one even looked embarrassed. I turned the card over. On the back, in faint pencil, someone had scribbled, "Real name? Ask Mom." My jaw tensed. I didn't blink. I didn't respond. I simply tucked the card under my plate and smoothed the fabric of my dress. The same dress I'd spent hours choosing. The one I wore believing, stupidly, that tonight might mean something. The next blow came quieter. My mother, ever the queen of subtle damage, leaned toward me with a smile that had been polished over decades. "Since you're here," she said sweetly, "could you take care of this?" She slid a sealed envelope across the table like she was handing me a thank you card. I picked it up. Heavy, thicker than expected. I opened it slowly, deliberately. Inside was a printed invoice. Elegant font, embossed heading from a high-end San Antonio event planner. Total amount due, $15,372,884. My name was listed as the billing contact. I read it twice. Isolde snorted into her drink. "You're the reliable one, remember? The family's financial backbone." Dad raised his glass without looking at me. "To tradition." That word. That damned word. My hand trembled slightly as I folded the paper, but my face remained still. "I wasn't consulted," I said softly, clearly. "I didn't authorize this." My mother tilted her head, her tone light. "You always come through, sweetie. You don't need permission. You're family." Family. The word rang hollow in the space between us. I looked around the table. Not a single person looked surprised. Not one. I folded the invoice again and slid it into my purse without a word. Then I stood. I didn't yell, didn't throw the wine, didn't demand respect or deliver a teary monologue. I stood up, gathered my bag, and said in a voice so calm it cut, "This isn't tradition. This is extortion wearing pearls." A few people blinked. No one spoke. I turned and walked. Past the buffet. Past the string quartet. Past the grand centerpiece with glittering candles and artificial roses. I didn't look back. Outside, the air was warmer than I expected, heavy with the scent of honeysuckle and something faintly charred from the caterer's grill. I took a deep breath, one hand still gripping the purse that now carried a price tag for betrayal. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. They'd expect me to spiral, to break down, to come crawling back with an apology or a checkbook. Not this time. I stood in the quiet of the parking lot, the lights of the villa fading behind me. I said, out loud to no one, "This time I won't be the bank, I'll be the boundary." But they weren't done. The laughter kept echoing long after I left, and the next act was already underway. The air outside was heavier than I remembered. Not from humidity, San Antonio at night had always been kind to the skin, but from the kind of weight you carry when your name becomes a punchline. I walked slowly to my car, heels clicking against the driveway, like metronomes counting down to something inevitable. The voices carried from the patio, laughter, glasses clinking. I caught Isolde's voice, shrill and unbothered, and then a man's voice, one of my uncle's maybe. "Well, at least she didn't bark when we handed her the bill," the group cackled. I stopped mid-step. I didn't turn around. I just stood there, eyes fixed on the shadow of my car under the dim street lamp, chest rising and falling in deliberate control. You learn, after years of being laughed at behind closed doors, how to hold still when it starts happening in the open. The silence in my car was deafening. I didn't start the engine right away. Just sat, staring out the windshield, hands resting on the steering wheel like I was waiting for something to give. My phone buzzed. A notification. Text from my cousin, Eli. A photo of the family gathered in front of the dessert table, arms around each other, wine in hand. Caption. "The ones who stayed." Seconds later, another message, this time from my mother. "Hope you didn't take it personally. You've always been so reliable. It's why we count on you." I stared at the words, read them twice. Screenshot. Saved. Reliable. Funny how that word stopped feeling like a compliment years ago. Reliable meant they assumed I'd show up, pay up, shut up. Reliable meant I didn't need to be consulted, just expected. Reliable meant I was allowed at the party, but not in the story. I opened Instagram, purely out of reflex, and there it was, Isolde's post from just minutes ago. A boomerang of her raising her glass, followed by a carousel of carefully selected, well-lit images of the night. Group hugs, the cake, speeches, and a final slide. A picture of the planner's invoice with my name blacked out. The caption read, "Cheers to our 35th anniversary. Thanks to our family's favorite ATM, always dispensing, never declining." The comments were already rolling in. Uncle Tim. LOL, classic Seraphine. Aunt Deb. She's been doing it since college. Even August added a line. Who else can we count on? I didn't comment, didn't like, didn't even report it. I just saved the post to my archive and closed the app. They weren't ashamed. They were proud. Proud that they'd gotten away with treating me like a card they could swipe and toss back in their wallets. Proud enough to brag about it. I opened my messaging app, typed out a reply to my mother. Something sharp, something final. Deleted it. Instead, I opened my calendar. Tapped a date 2 days from now. Typed, consultation, family law attorney. Saved. They think I walked away. I didn't. I stepped back, far enough to draw a line they couldn't blur, let alone cross without consequences. They'd always assumed silence was surrender, but this time it was strategy. And when I opened my inbox the next morning, I realized the line had already been crossed. This time, legally. The morning after felt like static. I hadn't even reached for coffee yet when the vibration on my nightstand pulled me from half sleep. I squinted at my phone. Chase fraud alert, the subject line read. Beneath it, notice, missed payment on account ending in 2394. I didn't have a Chase account. Never had. For a moment, I stared at the screen, thinking maybe it was a scam, but the details were too specific. My full name, last 4 digits of my social, billing address. I called the number. The woman on the line confirmed my worst fear. Yes, Ms. Thorne, the account was opened 2 months ago. Purchases include electronics, luxury apparel, and a steakhouse in Austin. Balance is just under $21,000. I froze. Can you tell me who opened it? I asked, voice steady, although my hands weren't. The application was completed online, same address as yours, same date of birth, but the contact email is different. It appears to belong to someone named Isolde Carey, my sister. My blood. I left the party with my dignity, I whispered to myself after hanging up. They followed me with fraud. By noon, I was dialing the event planner. I wanted to pretend this was about clarification, but I already knew. Hi, this is Seraphine Thorne. I wanted to double-check something from the party. The seating arrangement. It seemed a little off. Silence. Then a breath on the other end. I probably shouldn't say, the planner stammered. I'm not recording. I just want to know if it was a mistake. A longer pause. No, it wasn't a mistake. Your mother and sister were very specific. They said putting you near the kennel was practical and, this is their phrasing, symbolic. I didn't speak. They laughed about it, she added quietly. Can you send me a copy of your planning notes and any email confirmation? There was no hesitation. I'll forward them right now. I ended the call, put my phone face down, and stared at the wall. It wasn't about being erased anymore. This was war. I picked up the phone again. This time, I dialed my father. He answered like he always did, warm, slightly distracted. Sweetheart, how are you? I'm going to ask you something, I said. And I don't want sugar. I want the truth. A pause. Did you know about the kennel seating? More silence, then a sigh. Your mother said you wouldn't mind, that you were always so easygoing about things. She said, you always pay, don't you? I closed my eyes. I see. Seraphine, listen. This isn't... No, Dad. You listen. I'm done paying for your excuses. A quiet beat. Then I said it, clear and calm. You should all lawyer up. And I hung up. By evening, I was sitting across from Marcus Holloway, a friend from college turned family law attorney. We hadn't spoken in years, but he didn't hesitate when I called. I'm not looking for revenge, I told him. I just want this on record. I want the legal equivalent of a boundary. He nodded, taking notes. Then we start with a formal demand letter. You'll want it to be sharp but precise, no emotion, just documentation. Good, I said. Let's send them the one thing they never expected: proof. That night, I opened a fresh document, drafted my own version before Marcus could formalize it. To whom it may concern, you have repeatedly used my name, presence, and financial stability as a cushion for your decisions. You made me a prop at your celebration, a wallet without consent, a scapegoat when I refused to play along. That ends now. I didn't need their apology. I needed the boundary they would finally be forced to respect. And when the letter landed on their doorstep, so did the truth they'd spent years denying. It arrived in the mail 2 days later, certified and sealed, delivered with the precision only a legal envelope can carry. The weight of it wasn't in the paper, it was in what it represented. Finality, exposure, no more guessing, no more passive shrugs from people who played innocent while wounding you with a smile. Marcus had sent it just as we discussed. Inside the envelope was the formal demand letter, drafted with surgical accuracy. Attached were the planner's email exchanges, every time-stamped instruction about where I was to be seated and why. Also included the USB drive. On it, a 47-second clip. No edits, just clear audio of my mother and Isolde sitting across from the planner, sipping wine, laughing. "Put her near the kennel," my mother said with a little wave of her hand. "It'll be poetic." Isolde added, "She always loved dogs. It'll make her feel at home." And then they both laughed. No shame, no hesitation, just casual cruelty. "You can't argue with the face you make when you think no one's watching," I whispered, rewatching the clip one more time before handing it off to Marcus. By late afternoon, the fallout had already begun. First came a missed call from my father, then another, then a voicemail, his voice shakier than usual. "Sweetheart, please, let's not go down this road. Let's talk, just you and me." Then Isolde. She didn't call, she sent a voice memo. "It was a joke, Seraphine. That's all. You've always been dramatic. We didn't mean it like that. Please don't destroy the family over this. Mom is devastated." Destroy the family? I stared at her message and saved it in a folder labeled Documentation, May. The group chat was next. Exploded within minutes of the letter's arrival. Half the relatives pleaded for peace. A few tried to defend me, most notably Aunt Lila, who wrote, "She's been paying your bills for years and you treat her like a stranger at her own parents' table?" Others doubled down. "She's just bitter," one cousin wrote. "Always the outsider." "She could have talked to us like adults," another added. "Instead, she sends lawyers?" I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I simply forwarded the thread to Marcus with the note. "As discussed, let's proceed." They scheduled a Zoom call that evening, a last-ditch effort to patch the image they'd spent decades curating. As the screen lit up, I saw them, faces that once called me baby sis, now tight with panic. Mom wore pearls. Dad looked pale. Isolde, predictably, wore a blazer like she was back in court. They started speaking all at once. "I think we should just reset. You didn't have to go this far. You could have handled this with more maturity." I didn't interrupt. I let them ramble. Every word a nail in the coffin they built themselves. When they finally paused, I leaned into the camera. "You didn't erase me," I said. "You exposed yourselves." I scanned their faces, frozen, flushed, blank. And I'm done subsidizing my own erasure. Then, without another word, I clicked, leave meeting. No drama, no outburst, just closure. The next morning, the whispers began. Neighbors texting each other, church ladies clutching coffee cups tighter. Isolde's law firm issued a polite statement requesting clarification on personal matters affecting public perception. I didn't read it. I didn't care. I walked my dog in the early hours, the sun barely up. He trotted ahead, ears perked, tail high. A few joggers passed us. One smiled, another nodded. Quiet victories aren't always loud, but the silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the sound of them losing control. 2 days passed. No messages, no missed calls, not even a cryptic emoji from one of the cousins trying to feel out where I stood. Silence. It should have felt like relief, but instead, it felt like I was walking around a house that had been emptied of furniture, but still smelled like memories. My apartment was too quiet. No humming appliances, no podcasts filling the air. Just me and the dog, and the occasional sigh from both of us. They had always made me feel like an outsider. Now they were proving it with absence. I wandered from room to room with my coffee growing cold in my hand, stopping at the bookshelf to straighten a crooked photo frame, a picture of me at age 8 holding up a blue ribbon at the county science fair. The only person clapping in the background was a teacher. No family in the shot. Funny how early the pattern started. The buzz of my phone startled me. A text from Gina, a friend I hadn't spoken to in months. "Hey, I saw your sister's post got taken down. You okay?" I stared at the message for a while, then typed back slowly. "They edited me out for years. I edited myself in one time, and that was enough to burn the house down." She sent back a heart emoji and the words, "Proud of you. They should have known better." The word proud sat oddly on the screen. Not painful, just unfamiliar. Later that afternoon, an email popped up from Aunt Carol. The subject line read, "Thought you might want to see this." Attached was a scanned copy of a newsletter my mother had helped compile for the anniversary event. It was filled with glowing profiles of the Carey siblings, highlighting their careers, achievements, family contributions. There was no mention of me. Not once. Not in the family tree. Not in the timeline of milestones. Not even a throwaway line under extended members. "You can't mourn a grave they never built for you," I murmured. That night, I dug through an old external hard drive I hadn't touched in years. It had been labeled Archives, Thorne Family in Sharpie. I clicked through folders of pictures, videos, old scanned letters. And then I found it. Something I'd forgotten I even made. A video montage from my parents' 25th anniversary, a decade ago. I had stayed up all night editing it back then, cutting clips, adjusting transitions, adding background music. It was full of laughter, dancing, candid moments, and there I was, right in the middle of it, laughing, pouring wine, twirling a niece on the patio under paper lanterns. I played it twice, not to prove anything, just to remember. "I existed," I whispered. "They just didn't want to see it." I closed the laptop slowly, sat back, and let the weight of it settle. All the erasures, all the years of being too helpful, too available, too easy to overlook. It was never accidental. It was architecture, deliberate, precise. And I'd lived in that structure for so long, I'd forgotten I could move out. But the next voice I heard didn't come from the past. It came from the lawyer's office. And it carried a consequence none of us expected. The call came just after noon. I was pouring coffee, barefoot in the kitchen, when Marcus's name flashed on my screen. I wiped my hand on a dish towel and answered. "It's done," he said. "Chase cleared your name. They've accepted the identity fraud claim and closed the account. You're no longer liable." I closed my eyes and let the words settle into place. "And the rest?" I asked. "Restitution has been paid, through a family account, clean and documented." I didn't ask which family member had made the transfer. It didn't matter. It wasn't an apology. It was accounting. No one called to say sorry. No one emailed to say, "We understand now." But the money moved. The account closed. And with it, a decade's worth of silent permission I never meant to give. Later that week, I heard from a neighbor, one of those well-meaning church ladies who never outright gossips but knows how to pass along information. "They said you embarrassed the family," she whispered at the mailbox. "Your mom told Linda from the flower committee that you were always too sensitive, that you didn't protect the family legacy." I smiled, more amused than hurt. "Well, it was never my job to protect their lies." She blinked, unsure how to respond. I walked away before she could think of something polite. I learned Isolde's firm had opened an internal review. "Public conduct unbecoming" was the phrase someone used. Apparently, HR had questions about the online comments she'd made, about her ethics, about the kind of person who laughed about financial abuse on a public post. Dad stayed quiet. Of course he did. Loyal to a fault, but only ever to the loudest voice in the room. And I realized something, standing in my kitchen while feeding my dog, who wagged his tail at me like I was the only human that ever mattered. I didn't destroy the family. I just stopped financing its facade. I started making quiet moves, met with my financial planner, restructured my accounts, increased my retirement contributions, looked into properties in Colorado and Oregon, places where no one would drop by unannounced with old guilt and new demands. At PetSmart, I picked out a new dog bed, the plush kind with memory foam. It felt absurdly symbolic, but I bought it anyway. My dog deserved comfort, recognition, a place that said, "You belong." I watched him curl up in it the moment we got home. He didn't hesitate, didn't sniff it suspiciously. He just trusted it was his. I envied that certainty. That evening, I wrote in my journal, something I hadn't done in years. Freedom isn't revenge. It's finally choosing who gets to sit at your table. I poured a glass of wine, not to celebrate, just to mark time. Closure has a flavor. It's not sweet. It's dry, aged, and a little bitter if you drink too fast. A few days later, something arrived in the mail. No return address. The envelope was cream-colored, the same style as the anniversary invitations. Inside was a photograph, a candid shot from a birthday party long ago. Me at 8, holding a slice of cake, laughing at something outside the frame. I hadn't seen this photo in years. Taped behind it was a copy of the family portrait used at the anniversary slideshow, the one I wasn't in. And scribbled in pen on the back of my photo were 8 words. "You were always the best part of us. Sorry we didn't say it then." There was no signature. I didn't need one. But not all memories are soft. Even the beautiful ones can cut deep when they arrive too late. I didn't frame the photo. I didn't hang it. I didn't slide it into an album. I didn't burn it either. Instead, I tucked it into the bottom drawer of my nightstand, alongside old concert wristbands, spare keys, and letters I never sent. I reread the words on the back one last time. "You were always the best part of us. Sorry we didn't say it then." No return address, no name, just a quiet offering from someone who finally saw what they'd refused to see for years. It came too late to matter, and just soon enough to soften the edge of my anger. Maybe they remembered now, but I'd already moved on. That weekend, I drove south to San Antonio, partly out of curiosity, partly out of instinct. It had been years since I visited the neighborhood I once called home. The trees lining the street had grown taller, fuller, casting longer shadows across the sidewalks I used to ride my bike on. The church still had the same cracked bell. The elementary school playground had been replaced with newer equipment, but I could still see the outline of the old monkey bars in my mind. I parked near the diner, the one we used to visit after Sunday service, the place where I learned to split pancakes evenly, where my dad once spilled coffee and made it look like magic. Inside, the booths were smaller than I remembered, but the smell was the same, grease and syrup and something nostalgic I couldn't name. I slid into a booth near the window. A young waitress approached. "Hi there, what can I get started for you?" "Do y'all still do the number 5? I asked, smiling faintly. "The cinnamon French toast with hash browns?" She tilted her head, then laughed. "That hasn't been on the menu in forever, but I'll make it for you." I nodded. "Thank you." While waiting, I let my gaze wander. The mirror behind the counter still had that crack in the corner. The napkin holder was a little rusted. Nothing had changed, and yet everything had. Back home, I curled up on the couch with my laptop open and my dog at my feet. He snored softly, his head resting on the memory foam bed I bought him just weeks before. I opened Zoom for a call with Diane, a friend who'd quietly become more of a sister than my own had ever been. We talked about college, about how we once thought ramen and Red Bull were enough to build a future. We laughed until I wiped tears from my eyes. At one point, she said, "You know, blood's never been enough to earn my trust. Respect? That's what makes someone family." I nodded. "And loyalty's only real when it's not required." She grinned. "Preach." After the call, I poured a glass of wine, opened a blank document, and started typing. Sat by the dog kennel, how I paid the price and bought my freedom. The title made me laugh a little, not bitterly, just honestly. I wrote for hours, pouring out details I hadn't spoken aloud, things I'd carried for decades, now finally leaving my hands. When I reached the last paragraph, I hovered over the word bitter, deleted it, typed instead. Some debts aren't worth collecting, some legacies are better rewritten. I closed the laptop, leaned back, let the hum of my dog's breathing ground me. And then, Just before I turned off the lights, the doorbell rang, one last echo of a past I thought I'd silenced. The doorbell rang once, not urgent, not impatient, just enough to say, "We're still here." I opened it to find Ryan, my cousin who always stood at the edge of things, rarely speaking unless spoken to. He held a manila envelope in one hand, eyes avoiding mine. "They asked me to bring this," he said, voice low, like he hated being the messenger. I nodded. No words. He handed me the envelope. His hands lingered for a second, then retreated. He didn't wait for me to open it. He turned, walked back to his car, and drove away without looking back. I closed the door. My dog lifted his head briefly, then settled again. The envelope was heavier than expected. I opened it at the kitchen counter, slid the contents out. A notarized document. Official, black and white and cold. Amendment to the Carey Family Trust. Seraphine Thorne, removed as beneficiary. Effective immediately. No inheritance. Not a single dollar. Not a sentence of explanation. Just a signature from a notary and a timestamp from the same week I'd filed my complaint with Chase Bank. They didn't just want to erase me emotionally. They wanted to do it financially, too. What they didn't know, what they never bothered to ask, was that Marcus had already filed the injunction. My lawyer had frozen any transfers tied to family funds pending investigation of fraud and identity theft. The bank had already flagged questionable withdrawals from shared accounts. I wasn't just protected, I was 2 steps ahead. I walked back to my home office, opened the drawer, and pulled out a matching envelope. Not as thick, but heavier in consequence. I called Ryan. He answered after one ring. "I need you to take something back," I said, directly to Isolde, "and make sure Eris reads it too." He didn't ask why, just said, "I'll be there in 20. When he arrived, I handed him the envelope and said only one sentence. "You cut me out. I sealed your fate. We're not even—" I'm just done. Inside were 3 things. The email from Chase verifying the fraudulent account was opened using my identity and their IP address, the legal motion to audit the family trust, a note requesting restitution, and a forensic accountant review. They wanted me gone, but they'd made the mistake of touching what didn't belong to them. Within 48 hours, Isolde was subpoenaed. Her firm suspended her pending investigation. Her husband removed all mentions of the anniversary from his business site. My mother stopped going to church, not because she felt guilty, but because she hated when people whispered behind hymnals. One afternoon, a voicemail landed from Aunt Lila. "I just want to say," she began, her voice soft, worn, "they never thought you'd fight back. But you didn't just fight, honey. You outclassed them." I didn't respond. I sat on the porch, dog at my feet, a soft breeze brushing across my shoulders. I breathed it all in. All of it. The freedom. The silence. The power of being unmoved. Later that night, I wrote one final email. No greeting, no goodbye. Just this. "You don't have to apologize. I just need you to know I'm not afraid of being forgotten anymore." Then I deleted their contacts, blocked every number, filed away the documents, and stepped outside as the sun began to set. The dog followed me, his head pressed against my leg, tail wagging once, then still. There was no inheritance, no apology, and finally, no regret.